Welcome to the All Metal Mode podcast with your host, Michael Hare. Tune in every Monday night, 8 p.m. Eastern with co-host Gypsy Jules, and every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern with Matt Hoffman as we talk to guests, discuss metal detectors, equipment, and everything treasure related. Feel free to join in the discussion in the chat room during the show, and please, if you like what you hear, we'd appreciate you taking a moment, hit that like button, and share the link with your friends. We hope you enjoy the show. The All Metal Mode podcast starts right now. Nokta Macro Detectors is the fastest growing manufacturer in the industry, and for good reason. Many detectorists, including Mike Hare, call us the most innovative, but we're so much more than that. We listen to and care about our customers. We also offer a wide range of detectors to fit all of your needs. Come check out all of our products today at www.noktadetectors.com. Detectors for everyone, everywhere, a lifetime.
Hey everybody, this is Mike Hare. Welcome to the All Metal Mode podcast with my co-host Gypsy Jules. Boy, do we have a show in store for you tonight. Mr. Dorian Cook, I come across him in one of the Facebook groups, left his number, and I had to give him a call. That call turned into a few hours, and I could have talked to the man all night. He's very knowledgeable, great stories, and I'm really looking forward to tonight. As a matter of fact, I hope to get him on several times. I hope we can convince him to come back. Tonight's going to be kind of our typical show. We're going to ask our standard kind of questions, see where it goes, but I would like to get him back to go in depth on some of the stories he's got, because he is got some great stories and he is a storyteller for sure. So I'm telling you, get ready. It's going to be a good one. I apologize for doing show not being live last week. I've had a cold. I apologize. I still have it, but I think I'm through it for the most part. If you hear me cough, I'll try to mute myself tonight the best I can, but no guarantees. I got to tell you guys something fun I've been doing. So, I've got 2 days. I've got a few hours a day, 2 days a week usually to get out metal detecting. I don't get my fix like I'd like. My good friend Donnie from Ohio has been calling me, putting the phone in his pocket, and I'm there with him while he's metal detecting. Me chasing kids around and stuff, and I'm there while he digs. And I'll tell you, it's been a lot of fun. It's really been the highlight lately of my life, I guess. But don't forget, Gypsy and I, we're both broke and we need money. Help us out if you need any detectors, equipment. We carry all the major manufacturers: Minelab, Fisher, Technetics, Nokta, Macro, Whites, Garrett, XP, you name it. We carry it. We've got the new shafts are in stock for the 800s and 600s. So if you need anything, give us a call. Get a hold of us. Find us on Facebook. You can find Digger's Den on Facebook. Brian Harvey, he responds. Him and I, one of us will respond to you really quick if you have any questions or need any help. Don't forget All Metal Mode Facebook page. All Metal Mode UK Facebook page. That's for the UK podcast, obviously. Nokta Macro USA. That's really been growing, and a lot of people chatting. They're picking up momentum. You hide and watch. They're starting to really get noticed in the USA. Some good conversations and stuff going on with that. they're really starting to get noticed. I'm telling you, Nocta Macro make great detectors. All Metal Mode UK is every Thursday night at 8 p.m. GMT time, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Of course, you can, whether it's All Metal Mode or All Metal Mode UK, you can find us at Spreaker. You can listen right off of the Spreaker website. You can download from Spreaker. You can find us on iTunes, iHeartRadio, and several other affiliates, and also on YouTube. AllMetalMode.com. You can find my articles that I write on there. Just go to AllMetalMode.com and at the top, click on articles, and it'll take you to my most recent articles. I wrote a couple last week. Got a few more in the works. I'm pretty busy right now. I got a lot going on, so. But I've got more coming. 2019 Watts WATTS Rendezvous, 3-day golden treasure hunt, June 21st, 22nd, and 23rd in Mancos, Colorado. Camp with showers, toilets, a bunkhouse is $45 a night, camping's $40 a night, but you get 3 meals a day for that. $215 per person, cutoff is April 1st. So again, tonight's guest is Dorian Cook. This is why I started the podcast. This was my goal is getting these guys on like this. He's been metal detecting forever. He's a storyteller, and I'm just really looking forward to this. Hey, Gypsy, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
Good.
I love your story about living vicariously through friends in Ohio there with the phone in the pocket. You having to listen to the signals and go, oh, dig that one, dig that one.
Yeah, I get to hear it all. And it's really funny. He puts his phone in his pocket, and I can hear him good, and he can hear me. I mean, it works out perfectly. Today, he actually called me after work. He was actually metal detecting a job site that he was at, and he found 3 large scents.
Oh, man.
Yeah,
wow.
So I was enjoying that, and I had to get off the phone, but I was. How you been, Gypsy?
I've been great. I'm really super excited to hear more about Dorian. I've heard a lot. Mike called me a few days ago and said, "Oh man, I just talked to this guy named Dorian. He's going to be on this show, and I'm so excited." And I was listening to all this stuff about you, Dorian, and about how long you've been metal detecting and some books. I'm really excited to hear more and get into this and learn more about you, Dorian.
Well, Gypsy, it's one of our founding wise men said, don't believe anything you see, and only half of what you hear. I mean, don't believe anything you hear, and half of what you see. So, but,
yeah, are you saying I shouldn't believe Mike at all?
No, come on now, yeah, Mike's. I'm going to hire him as my PR man, I think.
He'd make a great one, I tell you.
I've had a lot of fun. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to scare you off, because if it would have been up to me, I'd have been calling you every day when Steph's at work and I got a handle on the kids, because I could just listen to your stories for hours. I mean, there's, since you and I talked, what was it? I believe Thursday night or Thursday afternoon, I've had so many questions, and it's going to kind of be hard to do this first episode with you, because I'm really looking forward to diving into the stories and stuff. But, maybe we'll get into some of them tonight.
Okay.
Maybe.
All right. Well, you give me some direction here. Which way do you want to go? Because,
so let's start in the beginning. How'd you get started in metal detecting? What got you into it?
Well, I was living in Dallas, Texas, at the time, 1972. I was born in 47. So if you do the quick math, that would make me, 20?
About 24, I think.
24. And I had, always liked to read adventure magazines, that type of thing. I was a prolific reader as a kid and still am, pretty much. and I came across ads, little classified ads, just maybe an eighth of a column, a quarter of a column or something in some of the adventure magazines, and for Detex metal detectors. And I got thinking about, wow, what kind of treasure could I find with a metal detector? And so, as it turned out, the Detex company was right there in Garland, Texas. They were one of the oldest companies in the industry. And it was founded by a man named Bill Mahan, who found quite a bit of treasure in his lifetime. And there's quite a story. If you don't mind me starting off with a story real quick, I don't want to digress too far, but this is so good.
Go ahead.
Bill Mahan, we kind of called him a land pirate. He's kind of a guy, if you shook hands with him, you wanted to check your hand and make sure your ring was still on your finger, so to speak. And Bill decided he wanted a Civil War cannonball. So he went to a battlefield in Arkansas called the Battle of Jenkins Ferry. And I've spent many an hour there hunting and found many a relic years later. But anyway, this was probably just a little bit before I bought my first detector from Detex. And Bill had not done his research, so he didn't know that the battle was actually fought almost 2 miles away from the river crossing where he was hunting. What happened was you had a fleeing Federal Army. They got to the Saline River. It was flooded up out of its banks, and they had to put a pontoon bridge across it to get the whole army across, and the Confederates were hard on their heels. And so part of the army was sent back up the way they'd come into the bottoms, and they got into a pretty hot fight with the Confederates, and they fought the battle in knee-deep water. Anyway, they tried to fire their cannons at each other, but the Yankees got off one cannon shot, and the cannon sunk all the way up to the body, to the tube, and so they gave up. So only one cannon shot was fired. So one of the worst battlefields in the whole United States in the Civil War to hunt cannonballs is Jenkins Ferry. Because there's only one to be found there. And I don't know if it was ever found or not. But anyway, Bill got a signal near the river crossing and dug down about 18 inches, and he heard the thunk of shovel hitting cast iron, and he got all excited. And then as he dug, he saw it was rounded, and he thought, oh, yes, I've got my cannonball, got my first cannonball. And as he dug, he started to see these little metal protrusions, 3 of them, and realized what he had was an old iron pot upside down. And in disgust, he started to fill in the hole and leave. And then he thought, well, my wife likes those old pots, so I'm going to go ahead and dig it up. So he spent an hour digging around it to where he could lift the pot up. And when he did, there were $60,000 in gold coins under it.
Oh, wow.
Oh, my gosh. I just got chills.
And that is the money. That is the money he used to start Detex metal detectors.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I got my first Detex metal detector, and it was a what they call a beat frequency oscillator. For you old timers, BFO detectors were the first. Yeah. This one had was one of the first to have discrimination on it, and of course, like everybody, I was living in a little rental house in the poor part of Dallas. I'd started a new landscape construction, and even though I was working for the rich folks, I wasn't living like them. And so I went over the yard of this little rental property that we had, a little 2-bedroom frame house in East Dallas, and found 38 coins. I went over it forwards and backwards every square inch and thought, well, that's amazing. I pulled 38 coins out of this yard. So then I graduated to hunting the parks and the school grounds and things in the area, and I was doing pretty good. And probably about the time I had around 100 hours of detecting under my belt and was getting to know my machine pretty well, I came home from work one day, and my key to the house apparently had the little thing that held it onto the ring had broken, and the key was gone. I couldn't get in the house. My wife had gone to the store. So I thought, well, I'll get my detector out from behind the seat of the truck and see if I can find another coin or two now that I have all this experience. Well, in 2 hours, I found 42 more coins in my yard.
Wow.
Now, what does that tell you about getting started in metal detecting?
Right.
Right.
You were hooked.
Go back to the places you hunted and didn't find very much when you first started.
Absolutely.
I'd missed all the coins that were deeper than 3 inches. I hadn't got any of the deep coins. There was a whole layer there waiting for me, and they were the best coins.
Oh,
so from there, from there I continued to to hunt, and then I had quite an experience that hooked me forever, I guess. Local elementary school built in the early 50s, big lawn around it and everything, and I'd done well taking a lot of buffalo nickels and things out of the school grounds. And they had a hedge about chest high in front of these one-story classrooms with big windows. And I thought, I'll bet in the summer when those windows are open, the kids throw coins out those windows. So I decided to get in behind the hedge and see if I could find a few coins. And right away, I got this really loud signal, and it was bigger than a coin. And I thought, well, what have I got here? And the dirt was fairly loose, and I started digging, and I saw part of a plastic bag, a sandwich bag. And I started pulling it out. It was very heavy. And when it came out of the dirt, it was full of silver dimes. There were just about 300 in that bag. Wow. And that was my very first catch.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Well, I was hooked.
Yeah, I bet.
I was hooked. I was addicted at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And,
what years coins were they?
They were Mercury. They were almost all Mercuries and a few early Rosies.
Okay. Yeah.
Why were they there? I have no idea why they were buried there.
Right. You never be able to figure that one out, huh?
Right.
That's strange.
So, a year or two passed, and it got to be about 74, and I graduated I visited the Garrett factory there in Garland, Texas, and graduated using a Garrett. I met Charles Garrett one day when I was there. I actually became a Garrett dealer, because when I'd go out to hunt the parks in Dallas, so many people would come up and want to know what I was doing and get right in my way. They get in my way where I couldn't swing the detector. They'd want to try the detector. And what I was doing was I was basically selling Garrett detectors without having a dealership. so I went over to the factory. Yeah. Well, see, I went over to I figured if I had to give up my detecting time explaining all this to these people, why not be a dealer and get something for it? And so I did. I became a dealer and started selling Garrett detectors. And I'd gone over to pick up some detectors and met Charles Garrett, and we got talking. And I had a pretty good Spanish treasure hunting project that a friend of mine had put me onto out in West Texas. And it was an old map drawn in some kind of a reddish material on old deer skin. And it showed an outline of some mountains and different signs that led to an old shaft, maybe a mine shaft that had been filled in. But before they filled it in, they put several burro loads of gold bars in the shaft, and a burro could carry 200 pounds of gold. So I thought that was worth looking for. I invited Charles Garrett to go hunt with me, and he took me up on it. And we went out to West Texas in his motorhome, and we actually found the site, found the markers, found a turtle that had been made out of rocks that the Spanish left, which was one of the markers on the map. And we asked the land owner for permission to bring a dozer in and scrape the side of this hill so we could try to find the entrance to the mine shaft, because it had been so cleverly sealed. And he said we could dig by hand, but we couldn't bring any equipment, and we never could. It was just too much. It could have taken 3 or 4 months digging around to try to find. Yeah, nowadays with modern technology, we could fly over, do an infrared picture, and probably see the outline of the mine shaft, because it would be a different color on the infrared photo. But anyway, we did not find the treasure, but on the way back home, right out of the blue, Charles Garrett offered me the job as marketing manager for the Garrett Company. And I was just kind of blown away by that. I didn't have any professional training in marketing, But I had one thing going for me. I'd been a dealer, and I understood the dealer's problems, and I'm a fast learner. And I took to the job like a duck to water. And I was the only marketing person in the entire metal detector industry in the United States that actually used a detector.
Right.
And,
Wow.
yeah, and so the dealers loved having one of their own in that position. And the company, during the 3.5 years that I was the marketing and advertising manager, I designed the full-page ads that went in the Treasure magazines, so on. Company went from number 5 in the industry to number 2. We were right behind White's when I left the company.
Wow.
And how long was you with Garrett?
3.5 years.
3.5 years. Now,
Yeah. Go ahead.
Is there a particular reason you got out of it?
I love the job, and I have the greatest respect for Charles Garrett. The man has done so much for the hobby. He would take hours to talk about, tell it all. And he was a personal friend. But, if I can offer one tiny point of criticism, he was not a man who was ever known for overpaying the hired help. And, I had left a pretty good little landscape business on hold to go to work for Garrett. And while I love the job and I met incredible people, I met the top people, the top pros in treasure hunting. I got to go places and meet people and invited to hunt places that the fringe benefits were fantastic, but I was only making about half what I could make with my landscape business. And I finally just had, out of necessity, to go back into my landscaping just to make enough money to get by.
I got you.
And I think Charlie Garrett looked at it like, hey, you get to do all this hunting and all these fringe benefits, so that's kind of part of your salary. But that didn't pay the bills.
Didn't pay the bills, right?
Pardon?
So, Dorian, I'm from West Texas originally, and born and raised in Texas. And you said y'all were, you don't have to tell exactly where you were in West Texas, but I'm just curious what area of West Texas.
Not a problem. I'll give you and everybody's listening a tip here. We were out near Bront, Texas. We were west of the main highway that goes between San Angelo and Abilene.
Okay. I
was
born in San Angelo.
Okay. That's a fantastic area. While we were out there, in fact, we actually ended up making a total of along with another fellow that helped me on the project, we did 3 or 4 weekend trips out there, and I picked up 60 pounds of arrowheads and work flint tools that we were just walking over. That we weren't there to look for Indian artifacts. They were just laying everywhere. And so I ended up as part of that experience years later writing an article for Lost Treasure magazine that was entitled "Don't Pass Up One Treasure While Looking for Another." And the point is, you have 2 treasure hunting tools when you go out. You have your detector and you have your eyes. And I live in the northwest corner of the Appalachians now, about 5 miles south of the Ohio River in Kentucky. And we hunt the soybean fields along the river because there was a lot of 1700 settlements, houses, things like that. But just in the process of metal detecting those soybean fields in the last 8 years, I've picked up over 500 arrowheads.
Wow.
Wow, that's incredible.
That is incredible.
Yeah, we're still allowed to surface collect in Kentucky. Go across the river in Ohio, and they'll arrest you on site if they catch you walking a field.
Oh, wow.
People
That's
still do
crazy.
it in Ohio. I haven't heard of any issues. Is it illegal over there?
It is technically legal, and they watch along the river, especially because all along the Ohio River, both sides, the artifact hunting is really good if you know where to go and how to do it.
Yeah. Oh, I would imagine. Yeah, I would definitely imagine. One thing, I if you don't mind, I know we're trying to stay on track here. I mentioned that Gypsy and I did an episode on Castle Gap. She's from that area. Would you mind talking? you filled in some gaps for me, and could you kind of talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, let me explain. Sometimes to make a story believable, it takes a lot of time and a lot of facts, which we don't have tonight. So, I can hit the highlights of the information I have. I think you'll find it interesting, but I wouldn't ask anybody to believe it just simply because I say it. But I will tell you that I have a lot more than I can give you about what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
The Castle Gap treasure involved, of course, Emperor Maximilian in Mexico. And I had the opportunity to meet one of the great direct grandsons of Jesse James while I worked at Garrett. He was Charlie Garrett's friend, and Jesse and I became fast friends. And I traveled out to California, and he opened the family albums to me, and I saw things that were truly amazing and learned the true story of Jesse James, which I recently told in my book, one of my books. And we'll talk some night. We need to do a Jesse James program.
Yes,
because there
absolutely.
were two Frank and Jesse James, and history has blended them into one set of brothers, and there were two sets of brothers. And when you hear the whole story, it is fabulous. Anyway, Jesse James was a member of a Scottish Rite Masonic Confederate organization called the Knights of the Golden Circle. And some of you out there surely are aware of the Knights of the Golden Circle and all the treasures they were supposed to have left. I specialized in searching for the KGC treasures for many years because of my contact with Jesse. He gave me much inside information since his grandfather had been a knight. And let's see, where were we going here? Help me out. We were.
You had kind of filled in how. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So Emperor Maximilian was also a member of the Knights of the Golden Circle. And when he was supposedly executed by firing squad, he had some Indian servants. I was told they were called Flathead Indians. It was their tribe. And that as they were taking Maximilian's body out to bury it, they saw his arm move. And so they made a fake grave, and they secretly loaded him up and took him back to East Texas and to near Livingston, where the big Indian reservation is. And they sent a message, and Jesse James's brother Frank, who was a skilled and degreed surgeon, came and operated on Maximilian. They had something like 10 bullets in him, and he lived. And he took the alias of John Maxey and went into the lumber business in East Texas. And his descendants still live down there to this day. Now, once Maxey began his recovery, he paid the Golden Circle $10 million to go to Castle Gap and recover his treasure and bring it to him. And I was told that was done. So, frankly, the source is good enough for me that I would not spend time looking for the Castle Gap treasure anymore.
Interesting. Yeah.
You definitely don't believe.
You definitely filled in some gaps, because I knew Jesse James was involved in it, or they were talking about, and I was wondering how he was connected to Jesse James, and then you brought up KGC to me and stuff, and it's like, oh, okay, well, that makes a little more sense. So what do you think about that, Gypsy? Is that interesting or what?
That's so interesting. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
I bet to be able to meet some of the people that you've got to meet, Dorian, over the years, and with your connection with Charles Garrett, and some of that must be, I can imagine how many stories you've have to tell. But one quick thing I'd like to say, we were talking a little bit earlier before the show about your books. You've written how many books now?
I have 5 books published to date.
Okay. Are those available online, or do we have to go through?
They are not. They are not yet. No, I've just more or less completed. I've completed what I call the trial period. I've become a writer, but I'm not a great book marketing person yet. When I investigated, I found that if if you get an agent and get into the big bookstores and stuff, the author only gets a few, basically, pennies per book. It's not very much. And,
Right.
I was hoping to supplement my income a little bit, with book sales. So I self-publish, and I'm just starting to make some contacts. I'm on the verge of getting my first 500 book order. And, from there, I'm hoping things will break open for me. But, so the books are not in wide circulation right now. They're only available through myself.
Okay. Well, I know Mike and I said earlier off air that he's definitely interested in some copies, and I am as well. And I'm sure through our, as we get to read some of your books and have you on again, that we can kind of help market that, give you a little free marketing there just by sharing with others. I myself, with my YouTube channel, since it's, just primarily
Sure.
on metal detecting and treasure hunting, I'll be glad to put in some plugs for you there as well, if that'll help you.
Gypsy, let me ask you a question. Are you folks down there, are you aware of what's called the John Swift silver mines?
I've heard of them. I'm not sure where they are exactly.
Okay. They were located in central Kentucky. I say that because out of the 6 he had there, I found 4 of them. And I have that story complete with X marks the spot details and maps and everything in one of my books. It's called Kentucky in the Early Years, and I do have the story for those out there that may be familiar with the story of John Swift. The mines are unworkable because they're conveniently located in the Daniel Boone National Forest, and of course you can't legally work the mines.
Right.
There were caches of silver, counterfeit silver coins. Actually, they had more silver in them than a real U.S. silver dollar, but they were in the form of counterfeit British crowns, and there were caches of them buried in several places by the Swift and his miners over the years. And I did find 2 of the cache sites, but they'd been emptied, and I was too late getting there. And I do have solid information from 2 local boys that live down there, brothers, who helped the man from Indianapolis named Arthur Wombles. They said they helped him load a pickup truck full of silver bullion out of a cave there.
Oh, wow.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Why we're kind of on that subject? You're talking about your books. What are the titles of your books? What are they about?
Okay. I've written 3 on the Civil War in Kentucky and 2 on the Pioneer Indian Wars. The Daniel Boone period. Mm-hmm. The first of the Civil War, my first book was called Perryville, the Battle That Turned the Bluegrass Red. And it was the biggest and most fatal event in Kentucky history. There were over 10,000 casualties. And it's kind of like as the old joke goes, the battle was treated like kind of a redheaded stepchild because at the same time the Battle of Antietam was fought, which it grabbed all the publicity. And yet, Perryville was one of the 20 biggest battles fought in the Civil War, and you're talking about 22,000 battles and skirmishes. So that's quite an amazing, important event. So I wrote about that, and what I did was I really concentrated on the lesser-known aspects of the battle that a lot of the big authors missed in their books, because I read their books first, and I said I want to do something better. So I also used reenactors to pictures in the book to actually help the reader visualize the battle itself at the various stages. Anyway, that was really I enjoyed it. It's kind of like your passion for detecting. I wanted to tell the story, and quite frankly, there are quite a few leads, as far as possible detecting places in the book. But the next book I wrote was on John Hunt Morgan, the famous Confederate raider. cavalry raider, and it was called John Hunt Morgan, a rebel. Let's see, no, I'm sorry, Kentucky's first terrorist with a rebel heart.
Great title.
So
great title.
Well, he was. That's what he was. He was a very impressive man in many ways. But technically, by our definition today, he was a terrorist. You know, at the peak of his career and his biggest raid, he with like 3,500 men tied up over 100,000 Union soldiers chasing him, and the local people in Kentucky. Yeah, all the Union supporting people in Kentucky were terrified that he was going to come their way. So
and right up into Ohio, and he wreaked havoc in Ohio.
Yes, and that's all in the book, all about down to the point where, and there was it's an interesting thing because his men had relieved many a wealthy citizen of their gold and silver coins, and they had them in their pockets at the time they were cornered up near. What is it? The island? What's the name of that island in Ohio? Where they?
I know where you're talking about, but I can't think of the name of that island off the top of my head.
Old man's memory here. Yeah. Anyway, they when they saw they were going to be captured, they were going to have to surrender at two different places. They slipped into the woods, and they got rid of those gold and silver coins. They hid them in the woods because. Everybody knew the Confederate soldiers were poor, and the only money they should have on them might be a few half dimes or dimes, something very small currency. The only way they could get those large denomination silver and gold coins would have been to rob people. And they were afraid if they were caught with those coins, they would be executed. So, and then a lot of them were killed, and a lot of them, some died in prison or whatever. So a lot of them never got back to get their caches. And I think there's a lot of those caches are still there.
I think you and I talked about this the other day. I don't believe in a lot of these cache stories, and I think I think there's truth to all of them, but I think the missing payroll and stuff that that's been recirculated over and over at different time periods, different parts of the country, and all that, where I absolutely believe that that the Confederates cached their ill-gotten gains from raiding, and I still definitely believe that there's some of those. I think they're small caches. I don't think 5, 6, 10 men got together and cached all their stuff in one spot. But I think as they rested and took breaks, I think why would you carry all that with you? Slowing you down and the fear of getting captured, bury it and hope you make it out alive and come back for it. So those make sense to me. And I personally don't know anybody who has ever spent any kind of real time on hunting, looking for any of those caches. I'm not saying it hasn't happened, but I don't know anybody.
Can I tell you a small cache story? A small cache, just to illustrate to your listeners. They don't have to look for Wells Fargo strong boxes to do well. One of the people I met at Garrett's was L.L. Lincoln. We called him Abe. He was from Rogers, Arkansas, and he was a very close friend of Charles Garrett. And every summer, L.L. would take a trip up into Idaho in that area, and he'd pay in gold on the Snake River, or dredge for gold, excuse me. And one of his trips, he was taking a back road that was pretty, just pretty much desert, not much around or prairie. And he noticed this kind of a hump in the prairie, not too far off the road, maybe 100, 150 feet. And there was nobody else out there on the road, and he stopped his, I think he had a Winnebago, and he got out and took his metal detector, and he went over to it, and he took his knife and dug into it and saw it was a melted down sod house. House been made out of sod because that was the only building material they had out there on the prairie. And so he started working his way around the sides of this mound, covered with grass, of course, with his metal detector. And he got to he went down the left side, across what would have been the back, and then up the right side. He got about halfway up the right side, and he got a signal on his metal detector. And he dug into the sod, and you could still see the layers of the sod as it had been laid. and he found a little pocket carefully cut out inside the sod wall, and there was a little bitty clay teapot in there, a little pink one, light pink, that you could hold in your hand easily. When he opened it up, there were 7 gold coins in it.
Oh, wow.
There was 2 $50 gold pieces. As I remember him telling me, there were 3 $3 gold pieces. And just, I forget the denomination of the other 2. But anyway, my point I want to make is those 7 coins he sold for $55,000 back in the
oh my goodness.
in the 70s. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
Small cases like that have been hidden by the hundreds of thousands at home sites all over the United States. Every state has them. It was very common back in the old days. The man did not tell the woman where he buried these small caches, like a mason jar that he put money in and out of. It was his bank. And he wouldn't tell his wife where he buried it because he was afraid that if somebody came in and tried to torture the location out of him, that she would tell to keep him from being tortured. So, the guys back in those days, the way they saw it, the woman was the weaker vessel, and so therefore the woman didn't get to know, and the guys always assumed that they would have time to tell the woman if they got into a situation where they were dying. Mm-hmm. But you know how life is. The sudden heart attack, the fall out of the barn loft, the mule kicks you in the head. Sudden death came to a lot of these men, and their secrets died with them.
Right.
And so these small caches are the most accessible and give the modern treasure hunter the best odds of really finding treasure, I would say, in our time now.
I agree with you 100%. One of my friends, and he's been on the podcast. We actually became good friends because of the podcast. He found 60-some silver coins. The newest one was 1832, 1834, something like that. And that's exactly what I think happened. And you're right. You kind of touched on this the other day when we were talking. And something I had really never thought about, but you hit the nail on the head. Life was hard back then. I mean, death was right around the corner. I mean, depending on the time period, you had to worry about Indians raiding. Farm life was tough. You could fall off of a horse. You could get kicked by a horse, a cow. You fall out of lofts. You're right. I mean, anything could happen. You never know. And I believe that 100%. I think that's your best bet of ever finding a cache. I mean, we hear these big stories and stuff, and I know a lot of people chase them, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think that the chance of a well-known story like that, some of these big ones, that I think your chances of finding it diminish. But I think finding those handful of gold coins or a small cache of silver, I think it's very doable.
There of course there have been Wells Fargo strong boxes and things. I know people who found them, and I could tell you stories about those we can get into maybe down the road. But
I love that. I love that story you told me. That was a neat story.
Yeah.
So,
but see, the problem is, looking back over four and a half decades here of metal detecting and treasure hunting, I know of a number of people who found the big treasure. Mm-hmm. And they were amateurs. They were not pros. And so they didn't know how to handle, the importance of total security, of disposing of the items, in a way that you could profit from them, without exposing yourself to risk from theft and this type of thing. And I saw a number of these people, I saw them come to grief that the treasure ended up causing them far more problems, bigger problems. They were much better off before they found the treasure.
Right.
So, a lot of times your biggest problems start when you find a good sizable treasure.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So,
that's true, and that's
yeah.
sad, that it's kind of come to that these days, because there's so many things that come into play now. I mean, it could delve into the history, or where then there's lawsuits and stuff like that, or it could just delve into monetary value and finding it on private property, and then maybe not having a contract drawn up with the owner, because a lot of times I don't, when I'm detecting on private property, sometimes I'll kind of throw that in there as a little, joke, like, oh, well, if we find something big, we could split it 50-50, but.
Right. Gypsy, I have a favorite story with a lesson that comes from your end of the country. Good friend of mine, fellow treasure hunter, that worked some of the Spanish stuff out in West Texas there, actually got onto a really good lead. It involved when the Indians that had been used as slaves in the mines rebelled against the Spaniards. The Spaniards often just cached, they fled with their loot, as it were, their bullion, towards Mexico City. But if they saw it would slow them down and they had to flee for their lives, they would often cache the bullion along the way. And this involved a cache of bullion. This involved a cache of bullion in a cave on a big ranch out there between San Angelo and Abilene, be east of the of those cities. But anyway, he had some really good information, and he went to the landowner. We talk about those guys being land rich and cash poor. Those farmers out there might own 50,000 acres, but they hardly have a pot to what pea in, as they say.
Yeah.
So anyway, this was one of those guys, and he was really a nice guy. And my friend went to him and was completely honest with him, and they cut a deal to split the gold bars that were in this cave if they found them. And there were supposed to be 40 of these bars, and they was, I don't remember the exact weight, but they were not real small. They were good size. Anyway, my friend, it only took him 2 days. He finally was going up a draw, and he found where the entrance to the cave had been rocked up. They'd just taken dry stacked rocks to close the entrance. And when he knocked the rocks down where he could see in the cave with his light, there were the gold bars right there stacked looking at him.
Wow.
So he kept his end of the deal. He took 20 gold bars to the farmer, and the farmer was thrilled. Everybody was happy. He took his 20 gold bars and left. And that very next weekend, the farmer's son, who was a lawyer in Fort Worth, came to visit him and saw these 20 gold bars stacked under the dining room table in the kitchen, and he went bananas. Where did you get these, Dad? This is amazing. So the farmer tells him the story, and his son tells him, you got cheated. You're entitled to a lot more. And he pressured him into suing the treasure hunter. And they ended up spending 3 years in court and all the lawyer expense. And the judge ruled that the treasure hunter was only entitled to 10% of the total. What he should have done was remove the gold quietly off the ranch, convert it into cash, take the farmer's half, put it in a paper bag, and stick it in his mailbox one night.
Yeah.
And that way, all the farmer would have had was an anonymous bag of cash. And that way, the treasure hunter would have kept his obligation, and he would have avoided a whole lot of trouble and being cheated out of his fair share, because they had a contract. And that verbal contract should have been binding. That's what happens when greedy people get involved in treasure projects.
Hey, real quick, we've got a great question from the chat. Bill Marsh wants to know, did Dorian ever meet Jimmy Sierra, and is he one of the large cash finders he was referring to?
I saw Jimmy Sierra's publicity, knew what he was about, but because of Jimmy was more or less representing our biggest rival, whites, he and I never hooked up. We were never buddies.
Okay.
People like Carl von Mueller, Gene Ballinger, Hard Rock Hendricks. I could go on naming names. They were my buddies. But no, Jimmy may be a great guy. It was just kind of a barrier there, because right towards the end of the 70s there, White sued Garrett, claiming that Garrett had violated their patents. And Garrett won the lawsuit because they proved that the circuits that White's was using had been invented by the Army and were in use in the Army mine detectors in 1947. Yeah.
Interesting.
wow.
So you can see why that there was a little bit of tension there between the Garrett people and the Whites people in that particular time frame.
Yeah. Wow. Now, okay, another thing, we got off topic here. Don't get me wrong. It was great.
All right.
I knew that this would happen because you have stories and you're a good storyteller. But we skipped over. I think we talked about one or two books. Can we finish that real quick? Because I really want you to talk about the Daniel Boone time period. We talked about Mad Anthony Wayne a little bit. I need these books. As soon as you get them printed or whatever, you let me know.
Okay, I sure will. They'll be, like I said, it'll be soon.
Okay.
I want to mention the third, the last of my Civil War books is entitled Battle to Battle, and it covers all of the other major Civil War battles in Kentucky besides Perryville. Okay. And I discovered something amazing in creating that book. Every single battle, including Perryville, the Civil War that I have researched, had some weird or strange aspect to it that the battles in Virginia and North Carolina and so on, you don't find that except rarely. You might have a battle here and there with a strange aspect, but every single battle in Kentucky has something really weird about it. And I, covered those things and brought them out in the book. And it's a fascinating phenomena, and I don't have any explanation for it yet.
Can you touch on that, or do we got to buy the book?
Let me touch on one example in the Perryville book.
Okay.
You have two armies that basically bump into each other looking for water because there's a huge drought going on and the creeks are dried up, and one of these armies has 75,000 men in it and the other has 32,000. So they run into each other at Perryville. The battle that was fought on the 8th of October in 1862, again, created officially 7,000 casualties, but my research indicates that they deliberately tried to downplay the casualties. They were more like 10,000.
Wow.
They didn't want to discourage recruitment, as it were, both armies. So they played down the amount of casualties. Okay. Every barn house structure around Perryville for 3 months, was a field hospital. Wow. That's how many casualties there were. Now, General Buell, the commander of the Federal Army, the battle started at like 7 in the morning on the 8th. An entire corps was involved against the Confederates. There were scores of cannons firing back and forth. The thunder of the cannons was heard in Danville, Kentucky, which was like 20-some miles away.
Wow.
And Buell had fallen off a horse and injured himself a little, and he was on a cot in his tent at the headquarters, or maybe in a bed in the house at the headquarters that he'd chosen, which was only 2 miles from the battle. And due to a weird phenomena called acoustic shadow, he could not hear the cannons. And so when his officers came in and told him that there was a major battle going on, that the Confederates were pressing them hard, he said, "No, that can't be the case. Besides, I've scheduled the battle for tomorrow, not today." And, so Buell did not realize until the battle went on till dark, till after 7 o'clock that night, and Buell didn't realize till about 4:30 in the afternoon that there was actually, excuse me, that nearly half of his army had been involved and they'd taken huge casualties, and he didn't even know it. The command. On the other side, Braxton Bragg, the Confederate commander, he didn't know that he was fighting 3 corps of the Union Army. He thought he was basically a minor part of Buell's army, and did not realize that a whole corps was just out of sight on his left, and had they moved forward, the entire Confederate army would have been destroyed. But they didn't. They stayed in camp because they were told by Buell that the battle would not take place till the next day. So at the end of the day, the Confederates had just totally almost destroyed one of the three corps of Buell's army, and they were chasing them. And the army was panicking and starting to rout. It would have been a major, major victory for the Confederate army. It could have changed the course of the war. And General Leonidas Pope, who had been a Catholic bishop, ordered the Confederates to stop chasing the Yankees because he didn't want any night fighting. So it was a strange battle in so many ways.
That's interesting. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say.
Just saying that.
Go. No, you go, Dorian. It's you.
It's just, I'm just touching on some highlights. I go into really a lot of detail in the books. Anyway, you wanted me to talk about the Pioneer books.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There's two volumes, Volume 1 and Volume 2. It's called Kentucky in the Early Years, and the subtitle is Heroes and Hostiles. And it's little-known stories about the frontier heroes and the Indians. It covers Indian leaders like Tecumseh and Blue Jacket, but it also, covers Daniel Boone and Simon Kenton in detail. And I prove, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that Simon Kenton was a far bigger hero. He was the number one pioneer hero on the Kentucky frontier. He did probably 3 or 4 times more than Daniel Boone ever did. Boone got publicity, and once Disney had made a movie about him, that was it. But Simon Kenton was truly a real-life, incredible, almost superhero when you get into his exploits. He engaged. Pardon?
I was going to say, it's so funny you say that, because after reading The Frontiersman, that's exactly how I felt after reading that book. Simon Kenton, so little I'd never heard of him, other than when I drove through Old Town and it talked about he ran the gauntlet there. There's a marker in Old Town, which is just north of Xenia, Ohio. Until I read the book, and as the Frontiersman, as you read the book, by the end, you think of now people, the things that people look up to and kids look up to. This was a man to look up to. I mean, at least how he's portrayed in the Frontiersman. He was, just bigger than life, kind of, like you said, superhero. Just amazing.
He wasn't a perfect man. He had several affairs and things, but he was a gentleman with the women, and he survived the running of 9 gauntlets, and that had never been done in the history of the Indian and the white man wars. Most white men did not survive the running of even 1 gauntlet.
Right.
And Simon survived 9. And the last gauntlet, he walked through it. And the Indians just were so stunned, they stopped hitting him about 30 feet into the gauntlet. They just let him walk between them. They were so stunned because they thought, this has never been done. No white man's ever walked through a gauntlet.
For those listening, back in, I don't know when it started, when it ended, but, mid-1700s, late 1700s, if you were captured by the Indians, especially in Ohio Valley, Kentucky, that kind of thing, a lot of times they'd take you back to the tribe and they would make you run the gauntlet. From my understanding, and the gauntlet was everybody in the tribe, including kids and old people, were there with clubs and, you name it. They were there. And from my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Dorian, the men, they didn't want the men to survive. They would happily, from all the reading I've done, I've never read exactly on gauntlets or the history of gauntlets or anything in detail, but they were happy to adopt the children and the women into the tribe, but the men were purposely did not make it through the gauntlet in most cases?
Well, actually, there were a number of men that got adopted into the tribe.
Okay.
Tecumseh's right-hand man was a white man who'd been adopted into the tribe.
Oh, wow.
I think his last name, I forget his first name, his last name was Ward. But Wasi Gaboa was his Indian name, but he was a white man. And but the thing was, there wasn't any set standard. You didn't know if they were going to adopt you, give you a mile gauntlet where maybe everybody's got switches instead of clubs, or burn you at the stake, for entertainment. So it was a very iffy thing. Of course, Daniel Boone got adopted into the Shawnee tribe, and he was accused of being a traitor, of not escaping soon enough to really give Boonesboro a good warning that the Indians were going to attack and so on. But he was cleared of all those charges in a court, situation, and they actually promoted him, made him Kentucky's first colonel. He was the first Kentucky colonel.
Oh, wow.
And,
Very.
But anyway, what I did was, a lot of people don't know it, but one of the chapters involves the time that Simon Kenton saved Daniel Boone's life. The Indians attacked the fort, and Boone and a party were outside getting wood, and Boone got shot through the leg and broke the bone, and he went down. And he yelled at the others, "Don't try to save me, run to the fort, get in the fort." And everybody did except one man, that was Simon Kenton. And Simon Kenton did something he'd never been known to do. He threw down his rifle. He was the best shot on the frontier, and he was the fastest man on the frontier. He ran to Boone, scooped him up in his arms, and took off running for the fort gate, and two Indians cut him off. They came in at an angle, and Simon saw he wasn't going to make it. He turned and ran right towards the Indians, and he got 10 feet from them, and he threw Boone at him. And he hit both Indians, knocked one of them out cold, and gave the other one an Excedrin headache. Or actually he stunned him. And as he ran by that Indian, he pulled his own tomahawk and gave him the permanent headache. And then he picked up Boone, who'd passed out from the pain, in his arms again, and ran him into the fort and saved his life.
Wow. They were friends until old age, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They were friends. Yeah, there wasn't any real competition. No, it wasn't a competition situation. It was just that Simon Kenton had done so much. Simon Kenton survived 100 hand-to-hand combats with Indians, with hostiles. And, no other man had done that, So,
but he also, now, did he respect the Indians too? I mean, from what I've read, I've heard, do you believe in that? Do you believe in that?
Yeah. Yeah.
He had respect for them too. I mean, there were people coming in down the Ohio River just shooting at Indians if they seen them. And, there was bad stuff going on both sides, and you can understand how the Indians were hostile. But what I've heard and read is he had a lot of respect for them.
Well, Simon did. Simon never had a hatred of the red man. He just recognized the danger. It'd be just like you coming across a rattlesnake down there, you're into the country. You don't hate the snake, but you're aware that it's dangerous, and you're going to treat it. You're going to take steps to eliminate the danger. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
But and the man that hated the Indians was Louis Wetzel, who was one of the greatest Indian fighters on the frontier ever. But he turned into the first serial killer.
Oh.
He did. He lost, and that's it. This is all in the book. There's like 5 chapters devoted to Louis Wetzel because of his incredible life and feats.
Wow.
Wow.
But his father and his brother were killed by the Shawnees, and out of that came a white-hot hatred, and he devoted his life all the way into to the time he died, I think around age 75, to killing Indians. To assassinating them. And he didn't care if they were peaceful or not. So he was truly Kentucky's first serial killer, and he was never brought to justice for it. They captured him. They were going to hang him. He escaped from custody. They finally got him real good and had him imprisoned at Cincinnati and Fort Washington. And Simon Kenton got together a party of settlers and militia, as they called them. And he went up there and told the drunken commander of the fort that he was going to release Louis Wetzel and he was not going to execute him. And the drunken commander did it.
Huh.
So, Simon, I mean, it's fabulous. Like I said, most people have never been taught these things. They've never read, they never had them taught to them in school. And while I write nonfiction, the style I write in, it makes it read like adventure fiction. Because if you don't entertain people today, you don't get the chance to educate them. We are an entertainment addicted society. I'm sorry to say, but so you entertain as you educate.
All I can say is I can't wait. I'm going to need these books. I'm really excited. And we like Gypsy said, we will make sure that we do everything we can to spread the word. And I can tell you, the chat is usually going pretty hard. I'm going to be honest with you. Sometimes I'm boring, and the chat is almost has been at a standstill, and I'll tell you why that is. Everybody is tuned in listening to you. Without a doubt. Now, Philip's adding some good stuff. He said Simon Kenton is buried in Urbana, Ohio. Yeah, I'm from that area. I'm from Miami County, which borders with Clark County, which I don't know if Urbana is. Yeah, I think Urbana is Clark County. Simon Kenton statue in the square of Urbana, Ohio. So he must have left an impression. Yeah, that's like where that was his last day, I believe. He had a store there and everything. But yeah, I love that period. That period for me is, the French and Indian War on up into the Revolutionary War and all that, and even the War of 1812 is really where my fascination lies. For myself, yeah. Donnie said clean and large since. I don't know if you caught the beginning, Donnie, but I said how I've been hunting with you lately in your pocket, and how much I appreciate that, buddy. Another thing I keep meaning to say, I didn't say at the beginning. I was going to say before I even brought you on. For those listening, I told you I had about a 2.5 hour conversation with Dorian Thursday, and I'm always learning. Believe me, I'm always learning stuff, and I love to learn. But I've been at this 20-some years, and a lot of times people think they're going to teach me something, and I'm already aware, and I don't mean any of that disrespectful, but in about the first half an hour of our conversation, Dorian gave me 3 pieces of advice that were absolutely brilliant, and I'm not going to go into that right now. We're an hour into the show, and there's so much more I want to talk about, but you're a great storyteller, but the fact that you gave me 3 pieces of advice in that short amount of time, I thought, oh man, this is, I think that is my why I've been so excited to get you on. Anybody who can teach me something like that, and then you instantly become like a mentor to me, somebody I look up to, and that's I say, Dorian, I say this all the time, or I've definitely said it. There's a lot of people I respect in the hobby, but there's not many people I look up to. And I don't mean that rude in any way. I just mean I've done it. I've done a lot. I've found a lot of good stuff. I do have a lot of, I don't care if you're a dummy like me. If you've been doing it over 20 years, you've learned a few things, and so you're definitely somebody I would consider just a great mentor and full of stories and knowledge. And anyhow, let's move past
let me dilute all that praise just a little here. I want people to understand that I met the old geezer top professional treasure hunters that made their living at Garrett. That was one of the fringe benefits of the job. And some of them took me under their wing. Here I am, a young man. I was about 30, 32 or so, I guess. And they took me under their wing and they mentored me. They got me down the road. They saved me years of having to learn from the School of Hard Knocks. By teaching me how to hunt treasure professionally. I actually hunted treasure professionally for 2 years because of what I learned under these men. And I saw the value that when a young man can humble himself enough to listen to an old man who's been there, done that, he can advance his situation in whatever discipline or hobby or whatever that he's passionate about. He can advance himself years, within a matter of a short time. Because if somebody's already made all the mistakes in one area and they tell you what they are, then you don't have to make all of those mistakes.
Right.
That's what I've always tried to tell people, is just learn from other people's mistakes and your own mistakes.
And let me make this one point about the old guys that mentored me. They had come to the point in their lives that they felt they had an obligation to do this, to take young men like myself that were willing to be taught and listen and travel with them and sit around the campfire and listen to their stories and things. They felt an obligation to leave a legacy. So I am a legacy to those men that mentored me, and I would like to leave a legacy of people that had the same attitude that I did towards these older men.
Mm-hmm.
So I can only teach someone who's teachable, So that's what I'm trying to do. Is I'm trying to build my own legacy here, because I don't have that many more years, on the earth. But, yeah,
I think what you're doing with your books is going to leave a major legacy. I mean, you're telling stuff that is not told and not taught in school. When I was a kid, the history classes, a lot of that stuff was boring to me because it just wasn't even taught right. And like you said, it definitely wasn't taught in an entertaining. We were taught to memorize stuff, and just a short little history on Daniel Boone and we're taught, the Alamo and all this, and we've got all these movies these days. But you are leaving a legacy, and I think that's important for all of our listeners, with your books, and why I think Mike and I are so excited about reading your books, and I'm sure some of our listeners as well. And someone like you that did have those mentors, because like Mike and I were saying a while ago, I mean, we've been detecting, 20 plus years, but
what do we know?
We're all continuing learning something every day, and I'm so excited to have someone like you on our show, and like Mike said, hopefully have you back. And I've got a question for you, Dorian.
Sure.
And I know that you worked for Garrett, and you used I'm sure many other detectors in the past.
Right.
Do you mind sharing with us what metal detector you're currently using, or what metal detectors you have used in the past? Maybe some of your favorite detectors. And
of course I graduated, from the DTEX. What was it called? It was called the Coin something or other. A little gold and red unit, and then I started out with the Garrett BFO, then switched to the Garrett Deep Seeker came out, and I started using the Garrett Deep Seeker. And I don't know, do you remember the Garrett ADS Deep Seeker?
Uh-huh. Yep.
If you were to look at the colors and the way the design of the exterior of that detector, the colors and everything, I designed those, and I named the ADS detector. And if you look at the Garrett logo today, the word Garrett, the way the type style is and everything, that is my work from the 1970s. That's my design.
That's
so,
awesome.
So in a sense, I have a little bit of a legacy there. Still have a connection to Garrett in that way. the kids are running the company now, and I knew them when they were little kids, but I don't know them as adults, So, but I wish them well, and I understand that Garrett is now in the number one position as far as metal detection metal detector manufacturers in the United States, and I was told maybe even the world. I don't know, but I use presently. I've chosen. Now, let me say this: I've never been blindly loyal to any company in terms. I want what I think is the best unit that will do what I need to do. I own a Fisher CZ6, and I own also, what's the other Fisher? I can't even remember the model number now. It was an older one. I've got two older Fishers. I have a Bounty Hunter Platinum, which is a kind of a backup detector, and I carry that because I run into people sometimes that would like to start hunting, and it's a simple detector to get them started with. But for my main detecting, I use an AT Pro with 11-inch elliptical coil. And one of my big pet peeves and beefs is that very few people who metal detect today know how to pinpoint. I can take that elliptical double D coil, and I can pinpoint a half dime, and I can sometimes I can take my screwdriver probe and gently probe down and touch it on the very first probe. That's how well I can pinpoint. I don't carry a handheld pinpointer. I don't need it.
Right.
Hold on. Have you ever used one?
Yes.
Okay. Dorian, when I first started, there wasn't anything good. I went many years without a pinpointer. The Garrett Pro Pointer came out, and I thought, well, I'll give it a try, and I fell in love. And to this day, I use one. If I forget it at home, I can live without, but to me, I love it. But I get it. When you go years without one, you don't really need one. But
there's a technique called detuning that I developed back with the Garrett Groundhog, where you can take the coil and you can shrink it down to where it's only the size of a quarter, and that's the only spot on that coil where the signal you found will pick up. And once you've done that, it is absolutely easy to pinpoint the signal. Then I use a very long bladed. It's called a drain, kind of like a drain spade, or they call a sharpshooter in Texas. I think the Mexicans call it a bildookie, but I use that kind of a design with a better handle than the ones we had back in the day, as they say. But I usually can, I'll dig about a 6-inch diameter plug on a mini ball, and I usually bring the mini ball up with the first shovel that I pry up. And one of the reasons why, when I go out with a lot of the younger guys that have more expensive detectors, I'll find routinely, it's not every time, everybody has a bad day once in a while, but most of the time I'll find 4 times as much stuff as they do. And it's sheer experience, over 8,000 hours in the field, and just working with a one detector until you get to know it. Because I saw guys, I met guys that used the Garrett TR, which had no ground casting capability and no discrimination, just a straight all metal TR. And those guys could discriminate by sound, because I went out with them and they called their finds before they dug them. And they were accurate, And see, the thing is, we're spoiled. We got so many bells and whistles on these detectors.
Right.
And so many people are jumping from machine to machine to machine, and they never master a single one.
Exactly. That happens so much. I see so many people make the mistake as soon as a brand new detector comes out on the market, they're already finally getting used to the detector they're using. And then they jump out and buy another one because they think it's going to be better and deeper and this and all that. But if they would stick to the machine that they already have a lot of times and learn it really well and master it, they'd probably out-hunt,
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Well, I'm a little different there, guys. I like different tools for different jobs. But I think, I think you can look at it both ways. I think if you learn one detector and you understand what does what, something that amazes me is how many people don't understand the basics of a detector, and by making changes, how it's going to affect it. And I think if you get that, you can learn multiple detectors if needed, or tools, let's call them, for different jobs. There's no perfect detector and they're suited, but I do think there's something to be said for those people who learn a detector and stick with it. We've all seen it. I'm sure Gypsy, there's no doubt Dorian, you've hunted with that guy that's got that old detector and he's still using it 20 years later, and that guy can take a single tone, no VDI detector and call out his finds with it and kick your butt.
Yep.
There's no doubt about it. Mm-hmm. Yep. I agree.
No, I understand what you're saying about different tools, different jobs. I looked at what I was going to be doing, and I looked at the Garrett design capabilities, the weight. One of the things is, you can have the greatest detector in the world, but if you're totally burned out swinging it after 3 hours, it's not the greatest detector in the world.
Right.
You go home, especially as you get older, you go home, you get detector elbow or bursitis in your shoulders from that kind of thing. So weight is important. So you balance all those factors, and if you can't invest in a detector for every spatial thing, then, you have to go with the best all around. And that's one of the reasons why I chose the Garrett AT Pro, because if you can only afford to invest in one detector, I don't think, you could spend a better $600 on a detector in the market right now. Yes, you can pay more. You can spend $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. I think they got $9,000, $10,000 detectors now. I saw one that says that the screen will give you an image of whatever's under the ground. You can pick one of those little jewels up for about $30,000. But again, it's to most of us. I'm talking to the overall general detector buying population. Most of us go with one detector, and you made a good point, Mike, about the fact that some people are trying to do too much with too little. If you're going to go out on battlefields that have been worked by many, many other people over the years, you're not going to do well with, say, a Garrett 250, Garrett Ace. Mm-hmm. You're going to need that AT Pro. So do whatever you got to do. I'm of Scottish ancestry, and I wanted a family kilt in the tartan of my family from there. And you know how I got it? It was a $460 item. I saved quarters from my pocket to start putting them in a mason jar. And I saved for a year and a half, but I saved up $460 in quarters and change from my pocket. And that's how I got it. And so for folks on a tight budget, there's always a way. Always, if you want something bad enough, you can find a way. On our Facebook relic hunting page, which is called We Dig the Civil War Headquarters, our motto is "Can't is stuck in a mud hole." I borrowed that from the Appalachian Hillbillies. That's a favorite saying of where I live. Can't stuck in a mud hole. So the idea is, okay, if you got an obstacle or whatever, find a way around it, because I'll guarantee you, there are not any successful treasure hunters who are not people who overcome obstacles.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So that's a factor. I see a lot of people that have good equipment, but they let their mind defeat them.
Yeah.
Can I give you an example?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. I was hunting on the Perryville battlefield. That was actually part of my research, and I wrote about it in my book. But we were in a pasture where a lot of hot fighting had taken place. And the pasture was owned privately. I was not part of the park there. And so the owner, the really sweet lady who has since passed on, would let anybody who wanted to hunt in the pasture. So it was hunted hundreds and hundreds of times. by some pretty good hunters. So a friend of mine that uses an XB dose, been hunting several years, invited me to come down and go with him in his pasture. And he said, now, don't expect too much. You're only going to find a couple of mini balls a day. He says, and that's going to be hunting hard. He says, I've been here 6 or 7 times, and he says, most I've ever found was like 4. And I said, well, that's not good enough. I'm going to set a goal of 20 today. And he says, you're crazy. He says, you're crazy. He said, you're not going to even come close. And I said, I'm going to change his name to protect the guilty. I'm going to say, Bob, you are letting your mind defeat you. He says, it ain't going to happen. Well, at the end of the day, and this was our first hunt together, at the end of the day, he hunted one side of this pasture, I hunted the other, because the other, I knew my history, and I knew on the other side of that pasture was a fence line where, an entire rebel division had been behind that fence line with a stone fence, and they had shot thousands of bullets back and forth, and they'd resisted bayonet charges and everything else there. So I knew with that much action that field was not near cleaned out. But at the end of the day, I had 18 artifacts. He had 2. See, so we hunted another day. He got 4. I had 22. The third time, he's finally beginning to get it. And he's starting to come out of this mental shackles he put on himself. And he found 11. And I had 33.
Wow.
That's
you
amazing.
See my point?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Now, the last time we went, he actually beat me for the first time ever. So he has, in effect, he finally became one of my students, and he finally began to realize, hey, this old man's got something here I don't have, and I want it. That's fine. That's great. That's good.
That's
so. At the end of his relic hunting career, because he learned that he was limiting himself psychologically, he was preventing success by his own thinking. He's going to have a whole lot more relics in his collection than he would have otherwise.
I want to expand on something you touched on, which was, obstacles and getting over them. Excuse me. I apologize. I had to mute for a second and cough, but I see these people on social media. I want this detector. I can't afford it. I want this. I want that, and they can't afford it, and they can't afford it. I know people that have done it. Heck, I've done it my own way, not the same way. I knew a guy. 3 kids, just didn't have money. Couldn't. He wanted an Explorer. He had seen what other. Sorry, guys. He had seen what other people were doing with Explorers, and he was hunting a lot of parks and old schools, and he wanted to find more. So he wanted to find silver. So he went and he bought a cheap detector, and don't ask me what it was. I can't recall. Guys, I apologize. And he spent roughly a season in Ohio metal detecting. He'd take his kids to the parks, and while they played in the playground, oh geez, he would metal detect in between the scrap gold and the change he'd found. By that next year, he bought himself an Explorer. If you sit here and say you don't have the money to buy a detector, a good detector, whatever, you've already defeated yourself. There's ways, like exactly what you were saying, Dorian. there's ways. Make it happen. You don't have to start with a lot of money, but you can work your way up. If there's a will, there's a way. And it's how bad do you want it? Because it can happen.
Exactly. It's just like the guys are saying, I participated in a forum that involved a lot of Virginia relic hunters. They say, all the good places are gone. You can't find any unworked places anymore. This state's been hunted to death and blah, 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 blah. And I took one of these guys and I gave him an example of how to find unworked places in Virginia. And he was just stunned. I never thought of that. Right. Because you constructed a little mental box and you could not think out of the box. And therefore you just joined all the people that said, oh, the glory days are gone. There's nothing really left to find. If you find a mini ball or two for a whole day's hunt, you're just going to have to be satisfied with that. Well, if you're satisfied with that, that's what you're going to do.
Right.
Exactly.
If you're not satisfied, and I'll tell people, look, you're spoiled. You want it every time you go out. You want to fill your pouch. You know what? If you would risk 6 or 8 whole day trips where you find nothing at all, looking for a lost camp, and then you find that camp, you'll have 2 years of good hunting. Well, isn't it worth 6 or 8 dry runs to find something like that? But no, you won't do that because you got to have a pocket full on every single hunt.
Right. I think a lot of it goes back to exactly what you're talking about. People, they don't want to put in the time, the effort. They want the easy. Well, if you want the easy, you're good luck. The easy's hunted out for the most part.
Right.
If you want to do it, you gotta put into it. I always say you get out of this hobby what you put into it. But guys, we could go on a lot longer. I am sorry. I'm starting to feel like I need to get some medicine in me. I apologize to everybody for all the coughing. I was doing pretty good, and then it's just kind of hit me, and I'm struggling. So, Dorian, if you'll agree to come back, I say we end the show.
Okay.
We'd really like to have you back, though. I've had a blast. I know we haven't even scratched the surface, but I just feel like I need to go get some cold medicine in me or something, see what I got in the old cabinet. And I've actually coughed more during the show than I probably have the last 2 or 3 days. But I think it's a good time to end.
You got my sympathies. You got me this stuff a couple of months ago, and I coughed for 6 weeks. So you really do have my sympathies.
I appreciate it. Well, I'm getting better. I've been feeling a lot better. Just all of a sudden, it's hit me again. But let's call it a night. I think, Dorian, you did amazing. I'll tell you, it's funny. I could hear in Gypsy's tone how she changes. She was really excited to have you on, and of course I was. And chat was almost at a standstill tonight. You had everybody tuned in and listening. They weren't chatting amongst themselves because I was boring them like some of our nights, and they were really. I can tell they were enjoying it. So we'd love to have you back.
You got a difficult job to do this on a regular basis, and always keep it interesting to the point where everybody's on the edge of their seat. If I think you're doing a great job. And,
I appreciate that.
I can appreciate the obstacles you're up against. So just keep working on it. You understand the principle that if you can get new blood, new guests, people that have done things that aren't generally known. I don't go on a lot of shows and try to tell everybody about everything I've ever done. And
well, we are looking forward to it.
You're on the right track.
Yeah, we are so happy.
I'd love to. I'll tell you what. Somehow, some way, guys, you and me and Gypsy got to go out and hunt. We got to go hunt.
I'd love
That
that.
would
Yeah,
be
absolutely.
awesome.
I get to Ohio. I'm from Ohio, and I get to the Dayton area, which isn't real far from you in Kentucky,
Nope.
and I would love that. I'm hoping. I haven't researched it, but I supposedly have permission for some. My brother got it. Some fields around one of the forts from Mad Anthony Wayne.
Wow.
I don't know how close to the forts or anything like that. I don't know if there would be anything, but I think I told you I like to overlay the old maps, find the old houses. We could definitely get you up to Ohio for that if you'd be willing. I'd love to, and I'd love
Sure,
to get
that's
Gypsy back to Ohio sometime with me.
I'm dying to
Ohio's
go. You know that.
Ohio's is good for me. I can get there pretty quick. I'd all take you guys to Perryville, but man, it's a long way from Dayton.
Yeah. It's a good haul. When I'm home, I try to stay close to home so I can get as much detecting in as I can because of course all my family's there and time's limited, and
Sure.
so I try to stay home anyhow. But Dorian, it has been absolutely amazing show. Real quick, can you say your Facebook group again?
The name of the Facebook group is We Dig the Civil War Headquarters. In other words, We Dig the Civil Wars in quotation marks -headquarters.
Gotcha. I just wrote it down. Here probably tonight or tomorrow. I'll be joining, and I'm sure you'll see some other people from the show. Our show, I'll tell you, not many people listen live, but by the end of the week, it'll be huge. So I would suspect you'll see people all week joining. And Dorian,
Okay.
it's been great.
Well,
Go ahead.
All right,
sorry.
thanks a lot, and nice meeting you, Gypsy, over the phone. So look forward to
Pleasure meeting you.
We'll have you back.
looking you right in the eye, and we'll tell some stories around the campfire.
Yeah, let's do that.
That's wonderful.
And we're going to get you back. I'll get a hold of you this week sometime. Call me anytime, Dorian. I love talking metal detecting, but
Okay.
if not, you'll hear from me this week, and we'll get you scheduled in. See if I can schedule you in for another show.
Okay, great. Really been a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, thanks for coming on. Good night, guys.
All right, good night.
Good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.
All right, real quick before we go here, Gypsy Jules on Facebook and YouTube, Girls Rock Metal Detecting group and YouTube channel. She opened up, she just started a Facebook group. She's putting a ton of information out there. We like us some Kimmy. Ohio Relic Hunting on Facebook. Love that group. Dirt Pirates Facebook, YouTube, Huntress Kimmy and Clodhopper Scott on YouTube. They're in the UK, but I love watching them. We Dig the Civil War Headquarters. Again, that's on Facebook. If you'd like to be added to the group or something mentioned on the show, let me know. You can find me on Facebook. You can email me. You can find me one way or another. Of course, my phone number. Give me a call. I love talking metal detecting. 937-414-4578. Good night, everybody. I appreciate you tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.